Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. They said the river once carried stars. On warm summer nights, when the sky softened into indigo and the moon hung low over the woods of Kawanomori, the riverbank shimmered as though silver dust drifted along its surface. The elders spoke of this with reverence, insisting that it was the memory of ancient nights when the gods blessed the water with fallen starlight. Children pressed their hands to the river and pretended the stars tingled beneath their skin. Aiko had grown up beside that river, listening to its murmur, tracing the cool mud beneath her toes, and learning the rhythm of its tides like one learns a lullaby. To her, the river was more than water. It was a voice, presence, a companion. Every evening, when her chores were done, she walked barefoot from the village to the willow bend, where an old tree leaned over the water as though protecting its secrets. Lanterns from the village floated faintly behind her, glowing like distant fireflies. The moon carved a path across the river, a pale, trembling road. It was beautiful. It was familiar, and yet somehow it felt incomplete. Aiko often sensed something beneath the hum of the river, like a melody too soft to grasp fully. If she closed her eyes and listened very closely, she could almost imagine a voice hidden beneath the current, a voice singing, a voice aching. Her grandmother, Hannah, had noticed this strange sensitivity when Aiko was small. "You hear more than the surface," Hannah would say while grinding herbs by the hearth. "Some children listen with their ears. You," she tapped Aiko's chest lightly, "you listen with whatever is here." Aiko didn't know exactly what that meant, but she believed it. The village of Mizukura was simple. Wooden homes, rice paddies stretching in neat green rows, and a shrine perched on a hill overlooking the river. The people were kind in their own quiet way. They bowed to travelers, prayed at the shrine, and shared food in times of hardship. But over the years, life had softened them. The old traditions that once shaped the village had become faint memories. Most no longer bowed to the river. Most no longer left offerings at the willow. Most no longer feared spirits. Only Hannah still spoke of Kappa, river witches, and spirits who lived between reeds and stones. "Kappa are not demons," she would say, eyes bright with memory. "They are guardians, keepers of rules older than any emperor. Respect them and they protect you. Mock them, and they remind you why rivers can be dangerous." Aiko believed her. She always had. But she had never seen a Kappa herself. That changed on the night the moon drowned. The village festival, Tsukinomatsuri, was in full swing. Lanterns swayed from poles. Children chased each other with paper masks. Drums pulsed from the shrine steps. The air smelled of grilled fish, sweet rice cakes, and warm citrus from lantern oils. Aiko helped her grandmother hand out small bowls of festival soup before slipping away quietly, lantern in hand. She followed the familiar path toward the willow, letting the festival sounds fade into a soft, warm hum behind her. When she reached the bend, she paused. Something was different. The river glowed brighter than she had ever seen. Not merely reflecting the moon, but shimmering with its own pale light, as if the moon itself had poured into the current and dissolved. Mist rose from the water in thin ribbons. Dragonflies darted sluggishly, unsettled by the strange glow. Even the willow seemed tense, its drooping branches trembling slightly. Aiko knelt at the bank. "Why are you shining like this?" she whispered to the river. The water answered with a soft sigh, then another, and then a note, a single trembling note, like the beginning of a sorrowful song. Aiko's breath hitched. She leaned closer. Ripples gathered, pulling together as if shaping something beneath the surface. The silver light thickened, swirling like a moonlit whirlpool. A shape formed, a hand, pale and slender, reaching upward from the depths. Aiko froze. Her mind screamed to run. Every story about river spirits flashed through her thoughts at once. Kappa pulling children under, spirits seeking warmth, witches calling to the lonely. But something in the hand's movement stopped her. It wasn't reaching. It wasn't grasping. It was trembling. Slowly, the hand broke through the surface. Water dripped from long fingers, then an arm, then a shoulder wrapped in strands of riverweed, then eyes, large, luminescent, softly green, watching her, not hungrily, not angrily, but with a sorrow so deep it felt like a weight against her chest. Aiko inhaled sharply. The being rose until water reached its collarbone. Its skin had a faint green hue, patterned subtly like swirling currents. Its hair was long, dark, slicked against its face. Atop its head rested a shallow bowl filled with shimmering water, unspilled even as the figure moved. Kappa. A real Kappa. Aiko's lantern flickered. "You hear it?" the Kappa said, its voice soft as flowing water. The song beneath the current. Aiko's lips barely moved. I heard something. A melody. "The river sings its pain tonight," the Kappa murmured. "And she carries the weight of it." "She?" Aiko whispered. The Kappa tilted its head slightly, droplets falling from its hair like liquid pearls. "The river witch," it said. "The one who keeps the sorrow of the water. The one who knows why the moonlight drowns." Aiko swallowed, unable to look away from those luminous eyes. "I don't understand." "You will." The Kappa's gaze softened. "Your heart listens. Few humans still remember how." Aiko trembled, not from fear, but from something like recognition. "I'm Aiko," she whispered. Who are you?" The Kappa blinked slowly. "Kappa do not give names freely," it said. "A name is a promise. Promise is a binding." "But you told me about the witch," Aiko said softly. "You spoke your truth. Doesn't that mean something?" The Kappa's bowl of water wavered faintly, as though stirred by emotion. "It does," it said. "I am called Sway." The Kappa lowered its gaze. "It means sorrow." Aiko's heart tightened at the word. "Why sorrow?" she asked gently. Sway hesitated. "Because I am the one who broke a promise," he whispered at last. "And the river does not forget." The surface of the water shivered. A second hum rose, higher, clearer, unmistakably a voice. Aiko turned sharply toward the sound. From the deeper shadows beneath the willow, the river thickened. Moonlight stretched across the surface like a long, glowing thread. Then, from the heart of the current, a figure emerged, a woman woven from water and night. Her hair flowed like riverweed. Her eyes shone with the color of deep pools. Her presence softened the air around her. "I am the river witch," she said, her voice rippling through the night. Aiko's breath left her entirely. The witch stepped onto the water's surface as though walking on glass. Her expression held sorrow, tenderness, and centuries of memory. "And this," she said, looking between Aiko and Sway, "is only the beginning of the story of how a Kappa learned to feel sorrow, how a river learned to weep, and how a broken promise changed the fate of a village." She reached out a hand. "Listen, Aiko of Mizukura," she whispered, "for the river remembers everything, even the promises mortals would rather forget." The morning after Aiko first met Sway, the river felt wrong. Not angry, not violent, just wrong, as though it were holding its breath. The villagers noticed it too. Fishermen stood on the bank long before sunrise, staring into the shallows with deep frowns. The river, usually lively with small ripples and darting fish, moved sluggishly. Muddy stones poked through the surface where water had always flowed deep. Nets hung limp in the men's hands, empty and cold. Children gathered in clusters, whispering nervously. "Is it sick? Did the gods leave it? Did someone anger the river spirits?" The adults' faces tightened at those words. They remembered the old stories, though they pretended not to. Aiko watched them pretend, and she felt the river watching them back. She knew why the water felt this way. She had seen the song beneath its surface, and she could still hear the hum of the river witch's voice in the back of her mind. Soft, aching, echoing like a dream that refused to fade. Grandmother Hannah sensed the tension as well. She walked along the bank early that morning, leaning on her bamboo staff, her eyes sharp. "You look troubled, child," Hannah said when she saw Aiko. "Your spirit feels heavier today." Aiko hesitated. She wanted to say everything, to spill her fear, her wonder, her disbelief, but the night felt too unreal to place into words. So she simply said, "I heard a song." Hannah stopped walking. Slowly, she turned her head toward Aiko. "A song?" "Yes." Aiko lowered her voice. "A voice beneath the water." Hannah's expression changed, tightening with the gravity of someone who had waited years for such words. "Tell me," she said softly. As they sat on the grass, Aiko recounted everything. The trembling hand rising from the water, the sorrow in Sway's luminous eyes, the name he gave her, and finally, the moment the river which emerged from the depths like a memory given shape. Hannah listened without interruption, her breath calm, her eyes fixed not on Aiko but on the flowing water beyond her. When Aiko finished, Hannah let out a long, trembling sigh. "I had hoped this day would not come again," she murmured. "But the river never forgets its grief, nor the promises made along its banks." "What promises?" Aiko asked. Hannah's gaze drifted across the river as if searching for old ghosts. Long ago, she said, a witch walked into the heart of a storm and soothed the river with her voice. She bargained with its spirits, promised to carry its sorrow in her own heart, promised to teach mercy to a young Kappa who lingered near the shallows. In return, the river would spare the village its fury, so long as the villagers honored the water with respect. Aiko swallowed, her pulse quickening. And did they honor it? Hannah's silence was answer enough. The villagers had grown careless, comfortable, forgetful. Over time, bowing to the river became unnecessary. Leaving offerings seemed foolish. Children laughed when elders spoke of Kappa. Even the shrine priest sprinkled less and less sacred water during harvest blessings. Hannah's voice fell to a whisper. A bargain is a bridge, Aiko. A bridge only stands if both sides hold their weight. Aiko felt a cold shiver ripple through her. She thought of Sway, the sorrow in his eyes, the name he carried, the promise he had broken. What happened to him? She asked. Hannah looked toward the willow bend, her face shadowed with memory. He fell in love, Hannah said softly. Not as humans do, but in the way young spirits sometimes cling to a human soul that shines brighter than sunlight on water. He made a promise to protect a human child. But the river, it asked him to choose between mercy and duty. And he chose mercy. Aiko felt her chest tighten. What happened to the child? She whispered. Hannah's expression was weary. Saved. But the river saw the Kappa's choice as betrayal. And betrayal, her eyes darkened, is a sorrow with no bottom. Aiko stared at the river, imagining a young Kappa pulling a child from the water while the current trembled with anger around him. So the river punished him. No, Hannah said. The river punished itself. It tore something from him, something essential. And in doing so, it tore a piece from the witch as well, because she carried the river's sorrow in her voice. The morning breeze rustled through the reeds, carrying with it a chill that felt deeper than wind. Aiko stood. She did not know why, but she felt pulled, drawn to the willow bend. The river whispered to her, not with words, but with a pressure she felt behind her ribs. When she arrived, the bend looked exactly as it had the night before. The willow's drooping branches swaying gently, the water glimmering faintly. But Sway was nowhere in sight. Aiko knelt and waited. Minutes passed, then half an hour. Her lantern dimmed, casting a softer glow. Just when she began to fear he would not return, the water rippled. A head surfaced slowly, then shoulders. Sway. His luminous eyes flickered with recognition and something like guilt. You came back, he said quietly. I said I would, Aiko replied. You gave me your name, even if you didn't mean to. Names were powerful. Names were promises. Aiko did not know the full meaning of what had happened between them, but she felt the weight of it. Sway watched her with unreadable eyes. Humans break promises easily, he murmured, like leaves snapping from branches. I won't, Aiko said. You might, he whispered. For the first time, she noticed the deep shadows beneath his eyes, the slight trembling of the bowl atop his head. The water inside it was dimmer than the night before, as though the moonlight could no longer touch it fully. Sway, are you hurt? His gaze drifted away. The river is restless. The sorrow returns like an old tide. When the river aches, we ache with it. The witch most of all. Aiko's breath caught. The river witch. Is she here? Sway hesitated. Then, raising a hand, he created a small, spiraling current. A shape emerged from its depths. A woman woven from water and memory. The river which stood upon the surface once more. Her eyes dimmer than before. Her expression tight with quiet pain. Aiko, she said softly. Child who listens too closely. Aiko bowed instinctively. Please, she whispered. Tell me how I can help. The witch smiled. Sadly, beautifully, like the curve of moonlight on broken water. You already have, she said. You listened. But that isn't enough, Aiko pressed. The river is changing. Everyone feels it. Something is wrong. The witch exchanged a glance with Sway, one filled with centuries of unspoken weight. The bargain weakens, the witch said, and the river remembers every forgotten promise. Aiko's pulse throbbed in her ears. What can we do? She asked. The witch extended a pale hand. Walk with us, she said. Hear the truth beneath the water. Learn the sorrow that shaped Sway's name. Only then will you understand the choice that lies before you. Aiko swallowed hard, but she nodded. She stepped forward. Sway reached out, hesitantly, gently, and took her hand. The witch began to sing. The water rose, not violently, but like a curtain lifting. Aiko felt herself falling. Not into the river, not into darkness, but into memory, into story, into the heart of a sorrow older than any human alive. And as the world around her dissolved into silver blue light, she heard the first full verse of the river witch's ancient song. A song of mercy, a song of breaking, a song of promises kept too late, a song of sorrow. The world around Aiko dissolved into a shifting tapestry of water and memory, pulling her deeper than any river should allow. She did not feel her body sinking. Instead, it felt as though she were being carried, drifting like a leaf caught in a gentle current. Light curled around her, shimmering silver one moment and deep blue the next, until she was standing on a stretch of riverbank that felt both familiar and impossibly old. The air tasted different here, cleaner, rawer, as though it belonged to a world before stories learned how to lie. Mist curled along the stones. The willow grew taller here, its branches sweeping the surface of a younger, wilder river. Aiko realized she was standing inside the river's memory. Beside her stood Sway, younger somehow, his eyes brighter, his posture less burdened by sorrow. And near him the river which appeared, not as the weary figure Aiko had met, but as something newly born of the current. Her hair shimmered like ink poured through moonlight. Her eyes glowed softly, filled with wonder she no longer possessed in the present. She knelt on the bank, her hands trembling as she touched the river's surface. It has chosen me, she whispered, her voice echoing lightly. The river listens to me. Her voice then was gentle, an uncertain melody searching for its tune. When she sang the first few notes, the river stilled, as though drinking in every sound. The storm that had ravaged the land moments before calmed like a beast soothed by a familiar hand. Thunder quieted. Winds softened. The river, which had been swollen with fury, settled into a reluctant peace. Aiko watched in awe. "So this is how it began," she murmured. The present river which, now standing beside Aiko in the memory, nodded slightly. "Here is where everything changed," she said softly, "where I gave my voice to the water, and where sorrow took root." Sway, the younger one in the memory, approached the witch slowly. His hair dripped with rain from the passing storm, and the bowl atop his head sloshed with trembling water. He looked at her with something like reverence. "You sang," he said. "Why?" The witch in the memory lifted her gaze. "To remind the river what it had forgotten, that it does not need to break everything it touches." "You spoke kindly to it," Sway said. "Humans shout and curse when the river rises. They fear us. You did neither." "Fear is loud," the witch said. "Kindness whispers. Rivers can only hear whispers." The younger Sway hesitated. "Will you stay?" The witch smiled sadly. "I think I must. The river has taken me into its heart. I feel its sorrow, its longing, its ancient loneliness." The memory shimmered, shifting into scenes like broken reflections. The river which learning to shape her voice into lullabies that calmed raging waters. Sway following her at a distance, watching the village with curious eyes. Villagers leaving offerings by the willow. Rice, fruit, folded paper cranes. Children bowing to the water before skipping stones. Respect, harmony, balance. The river glowed with quiet pride. The Kawanomori thrived. Then the memory shifted again, growing darker. A father running along the pier, screaming his child's name. A small sandal floating near the shallows. A storm swelling too suddenly. The child swept beneath the surface. And Sway. He dove with a cry, not a cry of triumph as old stories claimed Kappa did, but a cry of terror. His small hands sliced through the water, fighting currents older and stronger than he was. The child was drifting deeper. Aiko felt her breath catch. "Sway!" she whispered. The younger Kappa reached the child just before the darkness swallowed them both. With all his strength, he pushed the child upward, toward the flashing light above the water. The river trembled, confused, torn. When the child broke the surface, coughing and sobbing, the river stilled. The father dragged the child out of the water, weeping with relief. But the witch, standing in her memory, felt the river's reaction. It twisted inside her chest like a knot drawing tight. "You chose mercy," she whispered, stepping into the water toward Sway, even when the river demanded otherwise. Sway surfaced moments later, barely conscious. The bowl atop his head was nearly empty. The witch caught him as he trembled. "I saved him," Sway whispered weakly. "That's good, isn't it?" The river roared, not through sound, but through a pressure that crushed the air. Felt betrayed. For the river, the witch whispered, holding Sway close. Mercy is disobedience. Aiko's heart twisted painfully. The memory shifted violently. The river rose not in flood, but in fury. Water spiraled upward, wrapping around Sway's small body like a serpent. Sway cried out, reaching for the witch. "Please!" he screamed. The witch sang. Not in beauty, but in desperation, trying to soothe the river, trying to guide it back from the edge of cruelty. Her voice cracked with sorrow. "Do not take him," she pleaded. "He acted from compassion. Let his mercy remain his strength." But the river demanded a price. Aiko watched in horror as the water tightened. Something broke inside Sway. A light dimmed. His bowl's glow faded, its water turning dull. The river which gasped as a jolt of pain shot through her, her song faltering. The witch beside Aiko whispered, "I had tied myself to the river. When it punished him, it punished me too." Aiko swallowed hard. "What did the river take?" she whispered. The witch's eyes glistened. "His joy," she said. "His innocence. The part of him that could laugh freely. The part that believed kindness was always enough." "And from you?" Aiko asked. The witch lowered her gaze. "It took the ease of my song. From that day on, every note carried the river's sorrow, and mine." The memory wavered, returning them to the present bend in the river. Aiko felt heavier, as if her body had absorbed the sorrow woven through the memory. Present Sway, stood before her now. The brightness that once shone in his eyes was replaced by the shadow of centuries-old regret. "That was my promise," Sway said quietly, "to protect that child, and I kept it. But the river wanted something else. It wanted me to let him drown." Aiko wiped her eyes. She hadn't realized she was crying. "You saved him," she said. "That was the right choice." "It wasn't the river's choice," Sway replied softly. "And the river remembers." The witch stepped closer. "The villagers forgot their side of the bargain long ago," she said. "We carried the sorrow alone. But now, Aiko." Her hand brushed Aiko's cheek. "Cool, gentle. You have seen what lies beneath the surface. You cannot unhear the river's grief. And soon, the river will demand another choice." Aiko trembled. "What choice?" The witch's expression was grave. "A choice that will decide whether this village stands, or whether it drowns." The days following Aiko's glimpse into the river's memory felt heavier than any season she had ever known. Even the air seemed to press against her skin with a strange thickness, as though the world itself were holding unspoken words beneath its breath. Villagers continued their routines, tending fields, patching roofs, preparing rice cakes for the coming harvest. But beneath the familiar rhythms, an anxious undercurrent ran through everything. Dogs refused to drink from the river. Birds avoided flying low over the willow bend. Even the dragonflies, usually bold and darting, hovered at the edges of the wetlands as if afraid to touch the water. Aiko felt the change most of all. Not because the river spoke in words, but because it pulled at her heart like a slow, rhythmic tide. Every morning, She woke with a faint ache in her chest, as though she had spent the whole night weeping without realizing it. And each evening, the sorrow within the river grew stronger, almost tangible. Her grandmother noticed. "You're listening too much," Hannah said gently one afternoon as she pounded herbs into a fine powder. "You must give yourself space to breathe. The river's sorrow is not your burden alone." But the witch said, Iko began. Hannah raised a finger. "The witch carries the river's grief because she asked for it, because she chose it. You did not choose. You simply heard." Iko lowered her gaze, fingers twisting nervously in the hem of her sleeve. "But I couldn't shut it out now even if I tried," she whispered. "The river doesn't sound like water anymore. It sounds like crying." Hannah paused, studying her granddaughter's face with a look that mingled pride and worry. "You have your mother's heart," she murmured. "And her curse." Iko looked up sharply. "My mother." Hannah's eyes slid toward the willow bend, thoughtful and distant. "She was a listener too," she said. "She never told you, because she feared it would draw you toward the river. She believed some gifts are easier to live without." Iko felt a sudden emptiness open inside her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Hannah sighed, rubbing her fingers over the smooth wood of the pestle. "Because once someone accepts the river's voice, they never stop hearing it. You were still a child. I wanted you to have quiet years. Years untouched by sorrow." Iko swallowed hard. "But I hear it now," she whispered. "It's too late." Hannah's expression softened. "Yes," she said, "it is." That evening, Iko returned to the willow bend. Not because she wanted to, but because she felt compelled, drawn by the same quiet ache that tugged at her chest each time she tried to ignore the river's voice. As she approached, the last pink hues of sunset fell away, leaving the sky washed in shades of blue-gray. Cicadas sang their final songs of the day. The willow's long tendrils swayed like pale fingers reaching for dusk. Sway was already there. He sat half-submerged near the roots, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the darkening current. The bowl atop his head glowed faintly, but its light was weak and uneven, like a lantern struggling to stay lit. Empty snail shells floated around him, thin spirals of white that drifted aimlessly on the surface. Dozens of them. Iko froze. "Sway. What's happening?" He didn't look at her immediately. Instead, he reached out and picked up one of the shells, turning it in his webbed fingers. The shell was cracked down the middle, the edges jagged. "The river is shedding its protections," he said quietly. "These shells, they belong to the creatures who served as its eyes, its ears, its helpers. Snails, turtles, clams, spirit keepers." He let the shell fall, and it drifted like a feather. When the river prepares for change, it discards what it no longer needs. Iko's stomach tightened. Change? What kind of change? Sway's gaze rose to meet hers, and she saw something new in his eyes. Fear, yes, but also guilt. The kind that comes before a flood. Iko's breath caught. A flood? But the river which, she said, the bargain. The bargain? Sway interrupted softly. is breaking. Aiko knelt beside the water. Tell me what I can do. Sway shook his head, droplets falling from his hair. You're human. Your hands can't hold back the current. Your voice can't soothe centuries of forgotten respect. But your voice can, Aiko insisted. And the witches can. Sway's eyes dropped. Maybe once. But now, the river doesn't listen the way it used to. Aiko frowned. Why? Because it's tired, he whispered. Tired of being ignored. Tired of being taken for granted. Tired of carrying sorrow alone. Aiko felt the words like a blow. She thought of the villagers, how they no longer bowed by the riverbank, how children splashed carelessly in the shallows without leaving offerings, how the priest recited prayers half-heartedly. But the village doesn't mean harm, Aiko said softly. They just forgot. Forgotten respect is still disrespect, Sway replied. And rivers, remember. Aiko reached out and touched the surface of the water with her fingertips. It felt colder than usual, sharper, almost like it resented her touch. She pulled her hand back quickly. Sway watched her. There's more, he said. Something you haven't seen yet. Water rippled beside him, darkening like a shadow growing beneath the surface. A moment later, the river which emerged, rising with a slow, painful grace. Her form seemed thinner now, more translucent, as though she had been singing too long without rest. The moonlight shone through parts of her like pale silk. Aiko, she said gently, child whose heart hears the river, you should not be here tonight. The water is restless. I needed to understand, Aiko said. Please, tell me everything. The witch studied her with deep, ancient eyes. Very well, she said. But know this. Once you learn the truth, you cannot unlearn it. Aiko squared her shoulders. I'm not afraid. Sway gave her a sad look. You should be. The witch reached out her hand. Come, she said. I will show you what the river sees when it looks at your village. The world blurred. Aiko felt her feet leave the ground. Water wrapped around her. Not wet, not drowning, but weightless, like being swaddled in cool air. She opened her eyes and found herself drifting above the river, above the willow, above the entire village. She saw everything. The men carrying large stones toward the water's edge, stacking them to build a wall to guide the river. The children throwing sticks into the shallows, laughing as they splashed. The priest standing on the shrine steps, pouring only a token amount of sacred water toward the river below. The nets stretched to their limits, pulled taut each morning by fishermen who blamed the river for being stingy. The villagers weren't evil. They weren't cruel. But they were careless, blind, disconnected from the sacred balance that had once defined their lives. Aiko's chest tightened. The river which spoke beside her, her voice threading through the wind. Do you see how far they have drifted from their promises? Aiko nodded slowly. They don't remember. And yet, the witch said, the river has remembered every offering, every bow, every song, and every forgotten one. The perspective shifted. A great darkness swelled beneath the surface of the water, not malevolent, but wounded. An ancient ache curled at the bottom of the river, coiled like a sleeping beast dreaming of storms. Aiko shivered. What is that? The river's heart, the witch whispered. Its sorrow, its memory of every broken promise. It is awakening again. Sway's voice drifted to her. And if it awakens fully, the flood will come. The witch turned her gaze toward Aiko, soft, sorrowful, unwavering. There is only one way to mend the bargain, she said. One path left that may restore balance. Aiko inhaled sharply. Tell me. But the witch shook her head. Not yet. You must see the final truth first. Only then can you choose. Choose, Aiko echoed. Sway's voice broke slightly. Every river keeper must choose. Every listener must decide whose sorrow they carry. The witch reached for her once more. Come, she said. The deepest memory awaits. Aiko felt the world tilt, felt the current gather around her as if preparing to draw her into the very heart of the river's sorrow. And as she took the witch's hand, she understood something with painful clarity. No one survived a flood unchanged. Not rivers, not witches, not Kappas, not humans. And she was about to learn why. Darkness folded around Aiko as the river which guided her deeper into memory. She felt no water on her skin, no cold breath dragging her downward, only weightless drifting, as though the world itself had become a vast, living current carrying her toward truths hidden for centuries. The air shimmered with blue and silver. Shapes formed slowly, shadows of leaves, ripples of long-vanished tides, fragments of voices half-remembered by the river. Aiko felt Sway's presence beside her, though she could not see him clearly. His sorrow clung to the current like faint residue, a reminder of the promise that had shattered more than just his innocence. Where are we? Aiko whispered. In the river's heart, the witch said softly, where every silence is a memory, and every memory is a song. The landscape solidified. She stood on the same riverbank she had seen before, but this time it was different. The willow was younger, its branches reaching upward as if stretching toward light. The river flowed wider, more vibrant, swirling with colors that didn't exist in the present day. Turquoise, pearl white, deep jade. And on the opposite bank, villagers were gathering. Aiko frowned. What are they doing? The witch's voice grew tight. Watch! Men and women hauled large stones. Stones cut from the mountain, heavy and jagged. They arranged them in a line beside the river, creating a wall 2 feet high, then 3, then 4. The villagers shouted to one another, their voices echoing across the water. This flood season will be different. The river won't take us again. Strong walls protect stronger people. Aiko's heart sank. They built a wall even back then? Yes, the witch murmured. Humans repeat the same mistakes. Fear leads them to build barriers instead of bridges. Aiko watched a familiar figure approach, the younger Sway, lingering near the reeds, eyes full of curiosity and confusion as he studied the construction. One of the men spotted him. Kappa! The man shouted, brandishing a stick. Stay back! Sway flinched, retreating a few steps into the water. Aiko felt an ache in her chest at the sight of his younger self, so eager to help, yet so easily pushed away. They feared him, she whispered. They feared everything they could not control, the witch replied. A memory within a memory unfolded. Sway helping a struggling fisherman untangle a net. Sway returning a child's dropped sandals. Sway pushing playful children back toward safety while pretending to scare them. Sway bowing politely to elders on festival nights. Aiko felt tears gather. He just wanted to belong. And he almost did, the witch said. Almost. The memory warped like disturbed water. Dark clouds spread overhead. Rain hammered the river. It rose quickly, swelling against the newly built wall. Villagers rushed to reinforce it with wooden planks and rope. Fear shaped their movements. Panic guided their hands. The witch's past self stepped onto the river's surface, singing in a voice filled with calm power. Her melody soothed the water, slowing its rise, lessening the storm's fury. For a moment it seemed she would succeed. But then, a large branch, carried by the rush of water, slammed into the wall. Stones cracked. Mud tore loose. The structure leaned dangerously. Villagers shouted, "The wall is breaking! Brace it! Bring more wood!" They scrambled, but their frantic efforts only made the river angrier. Each rock displaced by panic became a weapon the current hurled back at them. Sway watched from the reeds, trembling. The witch's song wavered. The river was not meant to be caged, she whispered to Aiko. It warned them through storms, through restless tides. But warnings ignored become consequences. The wall finally gave way. A wave surged toward the village with crushing force. People screamed and scrambled away, and Sway reacted without thought. He launched himself into the water, pushing against the current with every ounce of his strength. He dove beneath the surface and braced his hands against the broken wall's remains, his small frame shaking violently. The river roared in fury, trying to swallow him, trying to drag everything away. But Sway held, and the witch sang louder, her voice rising toward the sky. The water's fury eased. The wave split around Sway like a river splitting around a stone. The flood lessened, pouring into the fields rather than the homes. Lives were saved. But the villagers didn't see his effort. They only saw a Kappa, a monster near their broken wall, an omen of misfortune. One man pointed, "It's his fault." Another shouted, "The Kappa tried to break the wall. The monster wanted to drown us." Aiko shook her head violently. No, that's not true. He saved them. They did not wish to see the truth," the witch murmured. "Humans often blame what they fear." Sway surfaced, gasping for breath, bowl nearly empty, body trembling with exhaustion. Instead of gratitude, stones flew toward him. Aiko cried out, reaching forward instinctively, forgetting this was only memory. "Stop!" He was trying to help, but her voice could not touch the past. One stone struck the side of Sway's head. Another hit his shoulder. The villagers shouted louder, emboldened by their fear. "Drive the Kappa away, before he curses us." before he brings another flood. Sway's face twisted, not with anger, but with heartbreak. The witch's song faltered. Pain radiated through her expression, reflecting Sway's pain, the river's pain. This was the moment everything changed, she whispered. The moment the river chose to carry sorrow deeper than any voice could soothe. The memory dissolved into a tempest of light. Aiko found herself back at the willow bend, knees weak, breath shaking, heart burning with a sadness she couldn't bear. She looked at Sway, who stood silently a few steps away. "You were punished for saving them," she whispered. Sway lowered his eyes. "Mercy is sometimes seen as betrayal." "But it wasn't," Aiko cried. "It wasn't." The witch placed a hand on Aiko's shoulder, her touch cool and steady. "The river chooses its keepers carefully," she said. "And it chose Sway, but not for his strength. Chose him for his heart, his sorrow, his softness." Aiko felt the truth tremble in her bones. The witch turned her gaze toward the village lights shimmering in the distance. "The river will test them again," she said. "Soon. And this time, only one thing can ease its sorrow." Aiko swallowed. "What thing?" Sway answered instead, voice barely above a breath. "Choice." Aiko turned to him. "What choice?" He looked at her with eyes that had seen centuries of sorrow. "The choice to carry part of the river's burden," he whispered. "To share its grief. To bind your heart to its song." The witch nodded slowly. "A river keeper. A listener. A bridge." Aiko's breath froze in her lungs. "Me?" she whispered. "You mean me?" The witch's voice softened. "You heard the river's cry when others heard only water. You felt its sorrow without being taught. You returned to it without fear." "Yes, Aiko." Sway stepped forward, his expression gentle and terrified all at once. "But the choice is not without cost," he said. "If you take the river's sorrow into your heart, you will feel its storms. You will carry its grief. You will hear its song even in your sleep." "And if I don't?" Aiko whispered. The witch answered, "Then the river will break its silence in the only way it knows, through flood." Aiko stared at the water, her thoughts a storm of fear, compassion, and quiet resolution. The river shimmered back at her, dark, ancient, aching. "What do I have to do?" she asked at last. Sway and the witch exchanged a glance, an old, heavy, sacred glance. The witch extended her hand. "Come to the river's heart at moonrise tomorrow," she said. "There the river will ask its question, and you must speak your answer." Aiko swallowed hard. "I'll be there." A single tear slipped down the witch's cheek, clear as moonlit water. "Then this river," she whispered, "may yet learn to hope again." Moonrise came softly over the village of Mizukura, draping the fields in pale silver and painting a path of trembling light across the Kawanomori River. The air hung heavy with anticipation, too still for summer, too cold for a warm night. Even the cicadas fell silent. It was as if the entire world held its breath, waiting for a moment that had been predestined centuries ago. Aiko stood barefoot at the willow bend, lantern dim beside her, heart pounding softly under her ribs. She had not slept. She had not spoken to anyone, not even Hannah. All day, she had felt the river humming beneath the surface of her thoughts. Low, aching, insistent. A sorrow that wanted to be heard. A question waiting for an answer. Sway appeared first. He emerged from the river with a quiet ripple, his form shimmering in the moonlight. His eyes looked brighter than the night before, but the brightness came not from joy, but from fear, from hope, from something fragile and trembling. "Aiko," he said softly. She stepped toward him. "I'm here." He lowered his gaze. I wish there was another path, one that did not require this of you." "There isn't," Aiko replied. "You said it yourself." Sway flinched. "Because the river has waited too long. Because the villagers forgot." Aiko nodded. "Then I will remember for them." Before Sway could respond, a soft voice rose from the water, gentle, crystalline, echoing like a lullaby heard through mist. "Aiko," the river which rose from the current, her shape blooming from the water like moonlight made flesh. She looked weaker than Aiko had ever seen her. Edges blurred, hair drifting like smoke, eyes dimmed with exhaustion. "The river's heart has awakened," the witch whispered. "Tonight, it will decide whether to reclaim what was denied, or accept a new song." Aiko swallowed hard. "What must I do?" The witch lifted a hand. "Step into the water, child who listens." Aiko nodded, once, firmly, and entered the river. The cold hit her instantly, stealing her breath. But beneath the cold, she felt something else, a pulse, a heartbeat, a rhythm that matched her own. Sway reached out, steadying her arm as the water rose to her waist. The witch began to sing. It was not the soft sorrow of the nights before, nor the desperate plea of the memory Aiko had witnessed. This was different, older, deeper, saturated with the weight of centuries. The river answered. A low, resonant hum vibrated through Aiko's bones. The water around her shifted, swirling like a living creature. Light gathered at her feet, pale blue and shimmering silver, tendrils of moonlit current curling around her legs. Aiko gasped. "What is this?" "The river's question," the witch said. "It asks if you are willing to carry part of its sorrow, to hold its memory when humans forget, to be a bridge between worlds." Aiko glanced at Sway. He shook his head weakly. "If you say yes, your life will never be quiet again. You will feel storms before they come. You will hear cries beneath water. You will know the grief of the river as your own." Aiko took a breath. "And if I say no?" The river witch's voice darkened. "Then the river will rise, and the village will learn respect through loss." The water surged up to Aiko's chest. The humming grew louder, shaking her heart. Aiko closed her eyes. She thought of the children laughing by the shallows. She thought of the fishermen who prayed even when they pretended not to believe. She thought of Hannah, who whispered old stories by the hearth. She thought of Sway, lonely, gentle Sway, whose mercy cost him everything. Her eyes opened. "I choose to listen," Aiko said. The river froze. The water halted mid-movement, suspended like glass. Moonlight brightened. The humming deepened into a tremor that shook the roots of the willow. Sway gasped, his bowl shattering with light. Aiko! But she did not falter. She stepped forward, until the river swallowed her shoulders. Light wrapped around her like a second skin. Her body felt weightless, as if she were drifting between worlds. The witch reached toward her. Then accept the river's sorrow, she whispered. The water surged. Aiko felt a wave of emotion crash into her. Not pain, not cold, but memories. Hundreds, thousands, floods and storms. Children rescued, lives lost, songs sung under broken moons. Promises made, promises shattered. Sway's laughter before sorrow replaced it. The witch's first song. The river's earliest longing. Everything. It rushed into her heart, filling every corner, expanding her sense of self until she felt she might break. She cried out, but the cry was swallowed by the water, softened into a note that merged with the witch's song. Then stillness. The river released her. Aiko collapsed into Sway's arms, gasping. Her eyes glowed faintly blue. Sway held her as though afraid she would dissolve. Aiko! Aiko, speak to me. Her voice trembled. I can hear it. Hear what? Sway whispered. The river, she breathed. All of it. Every sorrow. Every hope. It's singing. The river which stepped closer. Her face illuminated with something like awe. You are the first human in centuries to carry the river's voice, she murmured. And the river feels your heart. It accepts your vow. The current shifted, softening, calming, bowing to Aiko like a great creature bending its head. And then, something miraculous happened. Sway's bowl refilled. Light flooded the water within it, bright, clear, pure. His eyes widened in shock. My strength. He touched the bowl with trembling fingers. The river. It restored me. Aiko smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. Because you never betrayed it. You only loved too much. The witch placed a hand over Sway's heart. Your sorrow shaped you, she said gently. But now, part of that sorrow has shifted to Aiko. The river has rewritten your burden. Sway lowered his head, overwhelmed. Aiko, thank you. She squeezed his hand. We carry it together now. The witch looked up at the sky, where the moon cast a wide ribbon of silver across the river. It is done, she said. The flood will not come. The bargain is renewed. A soft breeze rippled the water. The dragonflies returned. The willow branches swayed like dancers reunited with wind. Aiko felt the river's gratitude warm, humming faintly inside her chest. The witch's voice softened. From this night forward, you will be the river's keeper, Aiko. When it grieves, you will feel it. When it rejoices, you will know it. But remember, she placed a cool, delicate hand over Aiko's heart. You do not carry its sorrow alone. Sway nodded, stepping beside Aiko. I will guide you as you guided me. Aiko looked at the river, her river now, and felt something bloom inside her. Hope, purpose, a melody older than time. Years passed. The villagers never knew exactly what happened that night. only that the river stopped rising dangerously, that fish returned to the shallows, and that storm seasons became gentler than before. They noticed Iko walking the banks each morning, dipping her fingers into the current, whispering softly beneath her breath. They noticed Sway watching over children who played near the pier. They noticed offerings returning, flowers, rice, folded cranes. They noticed the water gleaming brighter under the moon. And once a year, on a quiet night, a soft song drifted from the willow bend, beautiful, sorrowful, and full of light. Some said it was the river witch. Others said it was the Kappa. And many whispered it was the girl who had learned to listen. But the elders knew the truth. It was all three: Iko, Sway, and the witch voices intertwined, carrying the river's memory forward. A song of balance, a song of mercy, a song of sorrow transformed into hope. The villagers passed the tale to their children, who passed it to theirs, until it became legend. They called it the Song of the River Witch, the Legend of Kappa's Sorrow. And on quiet nights, when the moon drowned itself gently on the river's surface, those who listened closely could still hear it. A river remembering, a witch singing, a Kappa healing, a human heart carrying a sorrow strong enough to soften stone. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.